Hey, what's up, guys? Once again, we're excited that you are tuned in for what's going to be a very interesting next couple of weeks. Unmuted with PG. This is going to be my platform. Unmuted is really as I get my podcast going and just ready to share some information. I'm excited because over the next couple of weeks, we're going to deal with something that I think is so pertinent, not only to the world, but also to us locally, and especially as we are in the midst of a global pandemic. And man, our worlds have been turned upside down. But I also want to deal with COVID-19 vaccine. This has been in the news, and there's been a lot of misinformation, and especially for Black and Brown communities that we really serve. And so over the next couple of weeks, we're going to bring on some very special guests, some people who are experts in their field, and they're going to share for you information about the COVID-19 vaccine. And once again, full disclosure, I've had it. I'm getting ready to get my second one in the next couple of weeks, and I'll share some of the things that brought me to that realization about what made me decide to do it, and we'll move forward. But I'm so glad our first guest is he's no stranger to our community. He serves as director of pharmacy, ambulatory, and oncology services at Augusta University Health. And we're so grateful to have Dr. Wyche with us. And he is here to share. And we're just going to have a great conversation tonight. And we're going to cover a lot of different topics. Why the vaccine, what's some of the misinformation that's been happening. And we will share that, and we'll just kind of let this go. I hope that you will comment, leave us some information so that we can know. He's going to leave some information. There's some things we're also just want other people just be informed about. At the end of the day, these conversations are to inform you so that you can know what's really going on. So once again, Dr. Wyche, good to see you. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Well, thank you very much for allowing me to be here and participate in this. And I'm excited to talk about some facts and some myths and get information out there so we can educate the community at large and people can make the best decision for them based on facts and not on what they hear on social media or from friends, but on hard-based facts.
Yes. Well, let me go in just with full disclosure, Doc, and I appreciate you coming in and really appreciate having this conversation. Like I said earlier in my introductory remarks, I had the vaccine, but early on, I was a little resident about it. To me, in my novice, I'm thinking it was too fast. I was uncertain when it came to some political issues. And I was like, they just seem real fast that this wanted to go out. But some doctors that I trust here in our area, members of our church, Dr. Ronald Brown and Dr. Mac Bowman and others, and I had conversations with them, and they said, Pastor, here's the reality. It's not as fast as you would think. They've been working on vaccines all the time, and we can probably go into some of those. You can give more of the background of that. And he said, but Pastor, we'll be honest, with everything, there are always a potential side effects. But as we're trying to navigate to get to the other side of this, he said, this is our best recourse and our best option at this time. So when time comes, Pastor, we really need you to really do this. And when people get it, to go that way. But you already talked about what's some of the hesitancies that you're hearing. What are some of the things from your perspective that you think we could really start this conversation? We'll deep dive and go into it from there.
Yeah, and I think the most interesting one is the one you just hit on, and the one that I think is the most important. And quite frankly, here's my opinion. My opinion on this is that it doesn't matter what someone in the federal government tells you. It doesn't matter what someone in the state government tells you. It's someone you trust. It's someone you know who is going to give you those facts, and that you can feel confident in asking those questions that matter to you, because those are the same questions that every other person in this country was asking. And I think the approach you took is the right approach, and it's the approach that I've challenged people since we did our first town hall back in early December, is learn about it. And if you don't feel confident about it, go talk to people. We all know people in this community that are healthcare workers and know about it. I have spent countless hours myself, whether it's with people within AU Health or outside of AU Health, giving them information so that way they feel empowered to make the best decision for themselves, an educated decision for themselves. So that's important. So I think it really gets to kind of those myths. And so there's a few myths. I want to talk about the myth you just said, is that it was too fast. And here's the fact. When we look at vaccines normally take long periods of time. We're talking 10 to 15 years to develop. But why is that? And the primary reason is normally we don't know what we're looking for. We say we're going to go find a vaccine to the flu, but we don't know specifically within that flu what we're looking for. And what we knew within the coronavirus is something called a spike protein. And we knew this is what made it infectious. So knowing that one part cut the preclinical data, the research, the discovery phase from years to a week, literally. Okay. So when you do that, that's huge. The second part is when we're doing these clinical trials, two things. You need money, lots and lots of money. Vaccines and any medication is an investment, quite frankly, from a company. And ultimately, they want a return on that investment. The key here is that the government, all across whether it was the United States or all across the world, invested billions upon billions of dollars. For-profit companies, pharmaceutical companies, invested billions and billions of their own dollars. And so that got things rolling. That capital was really, really important. The third thing was, quite frankly, government has a lot of red tape. And what happens is generally when we go from phase 1 to phase 2 to phase 3 trials, there's a lot of time in between. And that's just unnecessary time. And quite frankly, in this, we were able to completely eliminate those time frames so that phase 1 ended and phase 2 started. Phase 2 ended, phase 3 started. So those three factors, knowing what you're looking for, number one. Number two, having the capital to invest in this. And number three, removing government bureaucracy is what led to ultimately being able to develop a vaccine that was safe and effective in a very short period of time.
Can you go into the last one? Because I do think what you just said is very significant. Because I think a lot of people don't know how medicine, in particular, specifically vaccines, work. There was a lot of government, when we say bureaucracy and those things, most people don't understand what that means. So we see on the news, FDA has now approved it or has given emergency approval to something. And some people hear that will say, well, they're rushing the process. And what I'm hearing you say is it's not a rush process. Typically, this process was done right. They just didn't have a lot of hurdles to jump over this time, simply because everyone was in agreement. We need to hurry up and move this along, not to rush it out, but to some of the similar or hurdles that perhaps would have been barriers to things before are not going to be a barriers in this one. Is that what I'm hearing you say correctly?
Absolutely. And I think that's 100% accurate. And the other key thing here is when we think about trials and we're talking about medication development, when we're talking about something like a vaccine, we need lots of people to get vaccinated. And to have the active vaccine as well as the placebo, which is there's no drug in it. It's like normal saline. It's what we get in a normal infusion of. And so the key here is in both of these trials, the two approved COVID-19 vaccines, we had over 70,000 individuals. That is a lot of individuals in a clinical trial to look at something. And so that's really important as well. This wasn't based on 10 individuals or 20 individuals. We're talking 70,000 people, 35,000 that got the vaccine, 35,000 that didn't get the vaccine. So we had numbers in addition to the reduction of all of the impediments, all of the hurdles that are in our way that take lots and lots of time were removed because of how important timing was within the development of this vaccine.
Let me hit this way, and you can say if I'm right or wrong. So I'm a poor man's doctor. When COVID-19 hit, I will admit initially when everything was coming down, I didn't know the severity of it. I had no clue when we first started hearing about coronavirus, COVID-19, I had no clue it would literally stop the world. And here we are still in the midst of a global pandemic. I will tell you some of my challenges that I think has caused the tension that we are now. Number one, I hate the fact that the virus got politicized. Once this virus got politicized, I really felt that was a major issue, because now, depending on your political parties and political leanings, then it depended on if you believed in face mask or no face mask, or are you being treated unfairly or this. Another thing that I thought was unfair is that there was a lot of messaging from the top down from government. When I say this is that I think the erroneous thing was said that they said COVID-19 would just go away. Doc, I'm of the belief, and all of my research and those in the health profession who told me, Pastor, COVID-19 is not going anywhere. It will be here with us till Jesus comes back. So that thought in itself became problematic. The third thing is I do think news media got involved and we start focusing, rightfully so, on death. So when we start talking about survival of death, all those particular things, so people start getting this false idea that as long as I didn't die, I'm be okay. And we're still learning the long-term implications of COVID-19. I fast forward to bring us to where we are now. And this is my thought. I think that the health field is saying, listen, COVID-19 is not going anywhere. Our vaccine is the best weapon we have now to get us to the point where we can manage it, lessen the strain on our health system. But also, if you do catch it, and the possibility is you will, possibly you probably will, it will not be as severe that it will come to something that will lead to death. It will be a more manageable illness that you can be quarantined or you can do what is extreme case of cold, mild flu is where I think the health system is hoping eventually it will get to. If am I right about or am I wrong? Do you hear anything I'm saying?
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what you said, and I think, and then I want to start with the first point, if you don't mind, and I completely agree. I think it's really unfortunate that that it became a Democrat Republican, believer non-believer. You could factor any type of dichotomy, and it ultimately came you're on one side or the other, and if you weren't on that side, you were ostracized by the other or by those that you agreed with, and I think that's really unfortunate. I think it's really unfortunate that we got into too much of that group think. And I do think from the very beginning, it really challenged people to at least voice how they felt and what they thought. And it really diminished discourse in our communities to discuss about what was really happening. Number two, I think you're absolutely right. The news, I mean, they sail off of sensationalization. Death is what they talked about. And death's a huge part of this. But much like you said, it is the sickness. It is those that were extremely had lung damage. They have cardiovascular damage. They have long-term damage. They're young. They're old. It's very, very important that we see this out, these long-term consequences of having COVID. And that's where the vaccine is so important. And we'll talk more about this later. But it's really reducing the severe cases of COVID and those that ultimately succumb to death with COVID. And when we take the vaccine is that people are still going to get COVID, but their chance of getting severe COVID or dying goes to almost zero. And that's why this is so important. And this is why I'm so passionate about it, why I'm so happy to talk to you, why I'm so involved in the community. But I completely agree with you in terms of the things that you're laying out there as things that really made this very challenging in the first, I'm going to say 6 to 8 months with this. I agree with you. I think COVID-19 at this point in time is going to be around with us for a long, long period of time. And it's going to become something that hopefully we're vaccinated enough at a large enough numbers that it becomes something like the measles, where we see slight outbreaks every once in a while, but because we have an effective vaccine and because the population is vaccinated, ultimately it's not impacting our day-to-day lives like it is today.
And that's it. I think that's the information that needs to get out, and why I'm excited about these conversations, because you hear people say, well, I got the vaccine and then somebody new got it and then they got COVID-19, or, there's a lot of things we see on the news. Somebody took the vaccine and 3 weeks later they died. So we automatically assume it was a vaccine that killed them. Can you go ahead and tell us what is exactly in the vaccine? Most people are assuming, is it like the flu vaccine where they are pushing or putting the actual flu or some weaker strain of the flu? What is actually in the vaccine?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And that's one of the myths a lot of times that we get to. So when we think about the two vaccines, so one thing I want to separate real quick is when people talk about the COVID-19 vaccine, I think we got to be very specific. So when I refer to COVID-19 vaccine, I'm referring to the two that currently have FDA emergency use authorization. That's the Pfizer vaccine and the Moderna vaccine. There's 200 plus other candidates that are out there. And too often when people talk about coronavirus vaccine, they may take a fact from one of those other 200 and pour it in with Pfizer and Moderna. So I think that's really important. So for the purpose of our conversation, I'm talking about Pfizer and Moderna. So when you think about Pfizer and Moderna, they have a couple of common elements. They have something called mRNA or messenger RNA. And essentially that messenger RNA sits inside a lipid particle. That is just a fat particle that is utilized to ultimately, when we give you an injection in your muscle, to allow your body to uptake it. Outside of that, there is sugars, such as glucose, those type of things, and then other electrolytes like potassium and phosphate. They're all in your body. That's it. That's all that's in this vaccine. There is no other things. Common myths are fetal tissue and tracking devices. None of that is in this vaccine, or at least these 2 vaccines that I can speak of that we have the information on. So I think that's really, really important. So all of these things that are ingredients in this vaccine are known to your body. They are part of your body. The messenger RNA is the only part that's not, and that's what is ultimately delivered and how we ultimately develop some immunity from this vaccine.
Talk to me more about what that mRNA does, because if you say it's a spike, what does it do, and why do you felt comfortable from a health field that this is the best course and how it stops or prevents a majority of us from catching COVID-19?
Yeah. So mRNA, the way it works, it's just using your body's own system. So what your body does is when your body needs to develop a skin cell of some sort, your body has mRNA and ultimately uses that mRNA and it produces a protein that creates your skin cells. Okay. So in the vaccine, it's no different. We're introducing mRNA that recognizes that spike protein that is unique to COVID-19. We're utilizing our body's own cells to ultimately create proteins or antibodies, recognize the COVID-19 spike protein. So whenever it's introduced into your body has the immune response or has the ability to recognize and ultimately fight COVID-19.
Let me take it further, because we were using Moderna and Pfizer. I had the Moderna. The next one I'm getting is Moderna. Now we hear these numbers of percentages. It says 95%, whatever. Right. So after the first one, they say you should be about 50, between 55 and 74 is what my doctor said. And then the second one, which really becomes a booster shot, if you will, pushes it up to 95. What do those percentages mean? And what's, and as practical and plain as you can say it, because people need to understand it's not 100%. Why is that not 100%? So what does those percentages mean? What in very plain terms for us?
So I'll try to make, this is a complicated concept. People who do this every day, much less when your life isn't completely about this. You haven't spent years studying it. So the best way to think about this is that if you do not have the vaccine and you get 95 people ultimately that are going to test positive for COVID-19 without having the vaccine, however many people that is, that could be 1,000, 10,000, whatever the number is. If you took a comparative group of 10,000 people, only one of those people is going to test positive for COVID-19. The sheer frequency, the sheer volume of the people that are going to test positive in the non-vaccinated group versus the vaccinated group. That's where that 95 and 94% effectiveness number comes from. Okay. So at the total trial, the 35,000 people who they got the placebo or did not get the vaccine. And then they looked at the 35,000 people that ultimately got the vaccine. What they found was that the non-vaccinated group had somewhere in the neighborhood of 105, 130 cases, something like that. And the vaccinated group had 7. And none of those were severe cases, which is the important part we kind of discussed a little bit earlier. So hopefully that helps. Again, there's a lot of math that goes into it and whatnot that's really complicated on our end. But hopefully for the person listening to this podcast, the takeaway from this is you take 10,000 people that are non-vaccinated, 95 of them, using our example, is going to test positive for COVID-19. Take another 10,000 people, and approximately one of those people is going to test positive after being vaccinated for COVID-19.
And let me push it a little further. Yeah. So there is a possibility, if I get vaccinated, that I can become positive with COVID-19. But even though I'm positive, it will not be on the severe side of COVID-19.
Absolutely. Yep. And that's the key. You will test positive because until we reach this concept of herd immunity, where there's so many other people that are vaccinated that our risk of exposure is very low, you absolutely can still test positive. And that's why whether it's continuing to wear masks, it's continuing to be social distancing, continuing to do the good practices with washing our hands, are going to have to stay in place for months until we get that vaccination rate up to a level we need it to be at to reach that herd immunity. The key is what you said. And the key is going back to what we talked about earlier, is that it is death in serious disease that we're really going to prevent here. And the vaccination does that undeniably.
So let me explain it, because I see people in the comment section.
Yeah.
You can be vaccinated and potentially and possibly, very minuscule, but it is possible to get COVID-19, but the vaccine lessens the severity if you get it and takes you down to zero, that you'll die from it. And people need to hear that. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I think that's the real key point. I want to make sure that I clarify this, because there's one part in there that I want to make sure people understand is, if I am vaccinated, I've received both doses of Pfizer. And for full disclosure, my wife has received both doses of Moderna, and my mom, who lives in North Carolina, has had one dose of Moderna, gets her second in a few weeks. So I have no preference over vaccine. I think they're both great, and I put them in my own family. So when you think about this, if I am exposed as a vaccinated person to a group of people that has COVID-19, I can absolutely become infected. The vaccine, though, that I receive with COVID-19 will not, and I repeat, will not cause you to test positive or contract COVID-19. And I think that's a key difference, because a lot of times people think, oh, the vaccine is going to give me COVID-19. That's not true. So I want to make sure we rule that out. But absolutely, if I'm at the ball field, I coach football, youth football here. And if I'm at the ball field and I'm not wearing a mask, I'm not social distancing, and I'm around my other coaches, and my other coaches, two of them have COVID-19, there is a chance that I'm going to contract COVID-19 because I've exposed myself at a close distance for a significant period of time, and I wasn't maintaining the social distancing that we've discussed. My chances, once I contract COVID-19, because I've been vaccinated and having a severe case or a deadly case, go to virtually zero.
Cool. And I think that's the big thing that people need to understand. That's why they're saying, even though you've gotten vaccinated, until we reach a certain level, we all need to continue to wear a mask, practice social distancing, and still do those measurements. Because at the end of the day, also, if you do potentially get it, you can still transmit it. So even though I may be safe, you really want to make sure that what we do, especially in the kingdom of God, is that we love our neighbor as ourselves. And that's part of the other challenge. I know that many people are having pandemic fatigue and they're tired. Listen, don't nobody like wearing a face mask, but I do it because I'm trying to be a good neighbor, and I'm doing it because it's bigger than me. The COVID may not affect me in a way, it may affect someone else, but I want to be mindful of making sure that I'm a good neighbor and doing those things. All right. So that's good. That's great information. Thank you, Doc. Let me throw this to you, because I know that you came. What are some myths that people are saying about this vaccine? What are some myths?
Yeah. And so we've hit a couple of them really quickly. So we talked about, can you get the number one myth? Can you get COVID-19 from the vaccine? And the answer is no, 100% false. The vaccine will not give you COVID-19. There's no live virus in this. Again, it's an mRNA. There's zero chance. So I think that's myth number one. Myth number two is, was it rushed? And we talked about that. The answer is no. We knew what we were looking for. We had tremendous amounts of money that were dedicated to this. Number three, we reduced all of the hurdles to overcome this. And we had a large population of people that was more diverse than, I'll say, almost any clinical trial that's ever been run in the United States history, which is really important as we think about generalizability and as our country is more and more diverse every single year. So number three, and this one's controversial, but I think it's important. And because of all of the questions I field, the number one question I get from those that are probably 22-ish to 40 is, will the vaccine impact mine or my wife's ability to conceive a child? Okay. And so again, I'm not, as we talked about earlier, I'm not going to dance around these type of things. I want this information out. I've had this conversation with many people, and I think it's important. I want to talk to the listeners tonight about this. So COVID-19 vaccine will not impact your ability or your partner's ability to conceive a child. The confusion arises based on a singular false report that then was taken and all across social media, and ultimately saying that the spike protein that's unique to that COVID-19 was the same spike protein that is involved in the growth and attachment of the placenta during pregnancy. It's fact. Spike protein, the spike protein we're looking at is novel to coronavirus. It is not the only spike protein. There are other spike proteins that we utilize for many other things. They are completely different. However, someone who either chose to manipulate that information or did not understand the difference in spike proteins put that out on the internet and has really, really confused a lot of young people who are looking at either growing and having their first child or expanding their family. And that's unfortunate. But that is just the honest truth about it. In the tests or in the trials, within the Pfizer trial, 23 different women ultimately became pregnant after being followed up with having the vaccine. And most of those people at this point in time have been able to carry that child full term. Some of them are still pregnant at this point in time. We haven't reported out the data. And in fact, the only person that suffered a loss of pregnancy during any of the trials was a person who received the placebo. I think it's really important that young people, young adults who are concerned about growing their family or starting a family need to understand that that's a huge myth. Okay. The other myth that we talked about is this idea of using fetal tissues or tracking devices that are in these vaccines. Okay. I can tell you right now that the two COVID-19 vaccines that were out there had no fetal tissue used in any of the development. Again, it's mRNA, it's lipids, which is fats that are in your body and all of your cells, as well as other electrolytes such as phosphate and potassiums that are in there. I think it's really important to know. So those are the four biggest the four biggest myths that are out there from my perspective related to the COVID-19 vaccine.
Cool. Thank you so much. Let me pivot this way. And I really appreciate you coming on. And one of the reasons that I appreciate you coming on is because of the demographic that I serve. God has graced our church to really make an influence and impact in Black and brown communities. And there has been the issue of a residency or this hesitancy, if you will, in even trusting government vaccines. We always lift up the Tuskegee experiment that keeps getting back. And that was an unfortunate situation, horrible situation, and tragic situation. And so from our perspective as Black and brown communities, that there has always been this sense and feeling that we don't want to be the guinea pigs. We don't want to be mishandled and treated based upon history. And we can go back and go of how this country throughout its years has done people in our community. With that being said, one of the things I'm grateful for on last week, University Health Systems was able, really came to us and say, listen, we really need your help because we are not getting as much participation as we need in Black and brown communities. And so we said, listen, we believe in it. We want to do it. And within a day or so, they allowed us to be a vaccination site. 208 people came and got vaccinated. That thanks be to God. And we're trying whenever we can to help those who want that to get that done. So that's very important. Can you speak to that, to those who have that issue? Now, I would say two reasons. I believe that we're seeing a lagging number of Black and brown people not really taking the vaccine. Number one, I do think there's a lot of misinformation, and I do think there's a lot of mistrust, which rightfully so. And so we got to be able to overcome that barrier. But number two, that most people are not talking about is accessibility. Before it came to us downtown in our thing, I had many people within my context and congregation who said, Pastor, I've tried. They were over the 65-year-old thing that they were asking for. They had went to the website and it just got hard. And I'll be honest, it wasn't until I went to the meeting and sat in there with the movers and shakers of University Health. And they said, Pastor, we having a hard time getting doses. We have not even met what was promised to us. And so whatever this Operation Warp Speed, and I know everything was going fast, they said, but Pastor, we are scrambling. We're trying to we can't even get the numbers that we were promised to get. So if you were to speak to that, misinformation, mistrust, and accessibility, when you hear that, when it comes to Black and brown communities, what do you say? What are some things that you would speak to on that?
Yeah. And, I mean, obviously I'm a white male here. And so these historical things were not a part of my upbringing. Things that were discussed. There's certainly things I learned about as I went through the medical community and why we put so many steps in to make sure the atrocities of our past are not repeated in our future. And one of the things I'm really proud of Augusta University Health, the Georgia Cancer Center, is all of our focus on minority research so we can improve outcomes in minority Black and brown communities because they've been underrepresented throughout time. Therefore, we don't have the best information on how medications or how therapies ultimately positively impact those communities. So from my perspective, I think I focus on it two ways. One is I can only be me and who I am. And the way I was brought up, quite frankly, is we all bleed red. And that's the way I was brought up by my mom, my dad, and in my church family. So the color of your skin or my skin doesn't matter to me. My job in this is to connect with people, try to be that outlet to talk through this, to empower people with information, to ultimately help them understand that other people are having these same challenges and confusions and anxieties related to this, and just be a friend at the end of the day and be a resource. So for me and Augusta University Health, we saw the exact same things when you talked about access. One, I think the state of Georgia is doing the best job they can at getting vaccine and getting it out throughout the state and ultimately to get people vaccinated. And I think they are looking for partners that can get people vaccinated quickly and at a high rate. I think University Hospital, as you mentioned, has done a great job with that. I loved reading the other day that their partnership with you all and those 208 folks that got vaccinated. That is phenomenal, and I love it. Augusta University Health, obviously, about 3 weeks ago, we partnered with a lot of the historic African-American churches throughout not only the CSRA, but brought those pastors, their wives, and other elders in the church that are very influential with the idea simply of, we know that what matters is people you trust getting vaccinated. And we know in the Black and brown community, that trust with leaders in the church is tremendous. And it was a great opportunity for these people who were 65 years old plus that have lived during and had parents that lived during some of the atrocities that you mentioned earlier, to ultimately have them on video, to have them speak about the importance of vaccinations, to set a positive example. And so what we have seen at Augusta University Health is in Good Shepherd Baptist Church, where we've run two outreach clinics. We're going to run a third on Thursday. We've been able to vaccinate after Thursday over 2,300 people.
Awesome.
88% of those identify as Black. And so when you talk about numbers, whether it's worldwide or locally or statewide, the numbers that are happening in the greater CSRA for Black and brown communities is as good as anywhere in the country. And I can only give you my data, okay? But here's what my data says. My data says the CDC says that of the 17 to 18 million people that they have data on that have identified what their ethnic background is, 5.9% of those individuals have identified themselves as Black non-Hispanic. Another 2.7 million have identified themselves as multiracial non-Hispanic. Okay, so we're talking at maximum, we're talking 20 some odd percent. But in our traditional Black race is non-Hispanic, 6%. Okay. In the United States, 12.1% of the population identifies as Black, not Hispanic. Okay. So our numbers aren't matching up. So at Augusta University Health, We have vaccinated after tomorrow. We'll have vaccinated we'll have administered 20,000 vaccinations. The data that we keep, 48%, I want to repeat, 48% of those individuals who receive vaccinations from Augusta University Health identify as Black non-Hispanic. So when it comes to reaching out in those communities, those underserved communities, creating equitable access, it takes everyone. It takes partnerships from churches and local organizations. It takes having University Hospital and Augusta University Health, the Department of Public Health, and others getting into the communities, building trust, and vaccinating others. So we're doing a good job here. Are we doing good enough? Absolutely not. And we're not going to do good enough as we move through this. Anecdotally, one of the interesting things we're seeing, and that's being communicated to me, is that as people are having discussions, especially within the Black community, is that the older community is much more interested in receiving the vaccine. And we kind of thought that would not be the case. We actually thought it would be as we got younger that would happen. And we're actually beginning to see this anecdotal effect that older people are feeling more impacted. They see others like themselves. They see their friends that they've known their entire life that are either having severe disease or dying from this. And the younger people, because people who are younger tend to have less severe cases, doesn't mean they don't have severe cases, but have less severe cases, that they're not approaching it with the same level of focus and importance that our older community is. And that's great because our older community is more at risk. But as we move into this later, in these next phases, 1B, 1C, where everyone 18 and older becomes eligible, it's really important that we educate this group of people that are highly educated. They have socioeconomic means. They have access to information from other means that sometimes our 65 plus demographic doesn't. It is going to be incredibly important that we educate these individuals the same way, giving them access to information, empowering them to make the best decision for themselves and ultimately for the community.
Man, that's good. Thank you so much. I appreciate you sharing that. We got a ways to go. We have some. Do you have a timeline? Have they figured out a timeline? I know as we are 65 and older, I'm hoping that they make the next move. Teachers, which, I think I'm hoping that they kind of move that forward. Next week, we have someone else coming in, and I'm going to talk to them about some of the ones coming down the pipeline, the Johnson & Johnson, and what that may mean to us, even though, and looking at those numbers, but I won't give you that question to answer. But what are you hearing about a timeline as we are thinking through? Are y'all still up in the air, or these things are still, let's say someone's listening now and they say, listen, I'm in that right range. What do I need to do to get the vaccine? How can I get in line? What do I need to do? So just kind of that piece.
So I think if you're 65 plus or you're a healthcare worker, so you're qualifying in that phase 1A plus is what Georgia calls it, or phase 1A in South Carolina, which is now 65 plus and also healthcare workers. I think the number one thing that we need to be doing is we need to be reaching out through organizations like your church and other churches and making sure that our congregations and the community know all of the different places that are having access to vaccine. Whether that is CVS, Walgreens pharmacy, local pharmacies, whether it's health systems like University Hospital or Augusta University Health, Department of Public Health. It's really important to understand what are the avenues for which I can get a vaccine. And I think it's important that we create the opportunities for individuals that don't have access to the current registration means. Right now, almost 100% of registration is done online. We know that when you get about 5 miles outside of Augusta, Georgia, access to internet breaks down significantly. Mm-hmm. In our 65 plus communities that probably half to 40% aren't going to be very technologically savvy. My mom's one of those. Okay. When she got her vaccine in North Carolina, my cousin was able to help her navigate the websites to be able to get her vaccine. So that's a huge challenge. We are making standard good progress in vaccinating those 65 plus and healthcare workers. However, those 65 and plus that are not technologically savvy, that do not have access to internet, are being vaccinated at a much lower rate because of that. And so what I really enjoyed seeing is that and again, we've been working in those faith-based communities, but whether it's any type of community outreach, is working with their congregations, the other people that they serve, to when those opportunities are available, to help those that need it to get registered, to be able to get access to the vaccine. That's really one of the important things. The city of Augusta is doing some novel things in terms of being willing to take individuals to clinics when they're registered. I know the church, the faith-based communities are doing things to make sure their congregation is getting registered, or putting them in contact with people within the congregation that'll help them get registered. This is really important because this is a forgotten group, in my opinion, that when we say we're making good progress, we're making good progress on those that have technologically advanced, have access to these type of things. When they don't have access, our numbers are not as good. I don't have the data on it, but I can tell you they're not as good. And it's a problem, and it's something that all of us are working on. How do we address this lack of connectivity, this lack of internet-based to ultimately get these individuals? And it's a problem that here at Augusta University Health, we're working on it. What is it to solve it? We can't have seniors standing outside in cold weather and being in line for days and days and days. Have enough vaccine, and that first come first serve mentality is just not going to work too much. But we're going to have to come up with a solution. I don't know what it is. We're batting it around. We've got lots of great ideas that come in, but we've got to be able to focus on that core population that's not going to get access and has at a very high risk being 65 and older.
I agree. COVID-19 really exposed a lot of ineptitudes within a lot of our communities. I said the same thing with school, with lack of internet access, and we're seeing it being played out now. But once again, we thank you so much, and your team and those working. Thank you for those calling who have really been engaged in this conversation. We're going to do this for a few more weeks this month. I want to bring in just different people to hear different ideas about the COVID-19 vaccine, so that ways that we can kind of help our communities to kind of get in front of this. Any last things you want to say, Doc, to those who are listening? Any last parting words, parting information that you want to share? First of all, thank you for sharing your time and being so liberal with your time tonight. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I think first of all is I just appreciate the opportunity to come on this evening and speak with you one-on-one and hopefully impact the many individuals that are out there that are going to take in this information. The biggest thing that I'm going to put out there for everyone is do not get your information exclusively from social media. Go ask those you trust about the vaccine. Go learn about it. I don't know anything about cars. Okay, I'm going to tell you that right now. So when I go buy a car, I have to go talk to someone who knows about cars. And while that's a bad analogy, it's a fact. And so if you're not confident in the information, the health information, go ask a healthcare worker you know. We all know nurses. We all know doctors. We all know pharmacists. It is our duty as healthcare workers to be knowledgeable about this information so that we can help those in our community be empowered with information, accurate information, to ultimately make the best decision. So please, again, don't look at Facebook. Don't look at Twitter. That's not the best place to get information. If you get information, ask people there. So I think that's number one. I think number two that I want to leave this group. Obviously, we're talking to a large group of people of Black and brown backgrounds. And I want to tell you right now, race and ethnicity are huge risk factors. And I'm here to tell you right now that the stats say that if you're African American, you are 1.4 times more likely to get sick with COVID-19 than a white person is. You are 3.7 times more likely to be hospitalized than a white person is. And you are 2.8 times more likely to die from COVID-19 than someone who's white. And that's just the stats that we use out there. And I think it's really important for this specific community to go out and get that information from whoever it is you trust so that those numbers don't continue. It's too important. The other thing is age is a huge risk factor. Every decade you get older, from when we look at the people that are kind of about 25 to 30 years old, every decade you get older, your chance of dying relative to this goes up by a factor of about 30. And so when we talk about our seniors, those that are so important in all of our lives, whether that's grandparents, parents, aunts, uncles, their chances, their rates that they are going to die at are going to be, if you're 65 to 74, 90 times that of a 25 to 30 years old. We have a duty to protect these people that are so important in our lives. And part of the way we protect them is when the vaccine's available, we go get that vaccine for ourselves. So those are the things I would leave you guys, everyone, with this evening. Thank you very much. On behalf of myself and Augusta University Health, we appreciate this partnership, and I appreciate members of your congregation reaching out to me to offer this opportunity that we share your congregation family and my work family at AU Health.
Thank you so much, Dr. Wyche. Once again, I want to appreciate everyone for tuning in tonight. And I must reiterate, this is not a hoax. This is not something to play with. Over the last week and a half, I can't tell you how much, Doc, I've had people within the extended family of our church lose their life to COVID. This is serious, and it's affecting our community at a higher rate. And so we need to make sure that we're doing what we can. We're going to give you as much information about vaccination as possible, but do your own good research. Once again, Google is not always the best method to get real information. That's one of our aims, is make sure you get it, but not just get the vaccination, but guys, let's not get weary in well doing. Wear your face mask, practice social distancing. I know that we all are tired and we have pandemic fatigue, but there's no need for us to come this far and give up, this far in the race. We got to make sure that we're covering those demographics within our communities that are at risk. I have not seen my grandmother since 2019. It's not that I don't love her, but I want to make sure that she's safe and she's taken care of. She's in North Carolina, Doc. That's home for me. So I'm still trying to beg her to take the vaccine. Y'all pray that my grandmother will get it at some point. We're trying hard, but we're going to keep working and making sure that people get the right information. All right, guys, we're going to do this next week and the week after. We got some incredible leading voices in this field that's really going to give us some more information. We're going to dig deeper into vaccine information and perhaps some barriers for us in our community. But I hope that you will also stay tuned this week, this upcoming Thursday, this whole month of Black History Month. We are celebrating Black love. And on this upcoming Thursday, I have an incredible conversation with international relationship expert Love McPherson. You do not want to miss it. We go about, and it's going to be a great time, a live interview. We're going to share everything about Black love, how we can navigate COVID, whether you're single or married. And we have some other things we want to share with you. So make sure that you come tune in on this upcoming Thursday. It's going to be a great time. Once again, Doc, thank you so much. We appreciate you. To all my Tab E fam, God bless you. I love you. Be safe, be easy, and know that we love you, but God loves you best. Take care tonight. Peace.